Hello, my name is Kate Wardle and I am delighted to be part of the Destination STEM Week, Sustainability for a Greener World. So I'd like to talk to you today about driving the future, the rise of the electric trucks. So I work for a company called SSE, and it's one of the leading energy companies in the United Kingdom. So our vision is to be a leading energy company in a low carbon world. We generate, transmit and distribute energy across the north of Scotland and central southern England. And we provide power to over 3.8 million homes and businesses in those areas. And what we're really focused on is renewable energy. So you can see in this diagram here, we've got wind farms that are offshore, we've got wind farms that are onshore, and they've got little solar panels in between. They've also got battery. And we also have these, which are hydro dams. What we do is we try and provide power using renewable means, and then we send it through our network and it gets to the places it needs to be, all the homes and businesses. So we're focusing on this because we want to help address climate change and to tackle global warming. So I work as an engineer in the electric vehicle part of SSE, and our focus in particular is on HGVs, or what we call heavy goods vehicles. So first of all, I just want to have a look at why do we need electric vehicles? So why do we need to move away from the petrol and diesel vehicles that we have at the moment? So the focus is on moving away from these is because burning petrol and diesel in vehicles is that they produce carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming. So if we have a look at this graph here, and this comes from the government. So this is total domestic GHG, or greenhouse gas emissions in 2020. Now the largest sector here is this light green one, and that's transport. So of all the greenhouse gas emissions in 2020, a quarter of them came from transport. So cars, buses, trains, planes, and HGVs. So if we can tackle that, we're really tackling the amount of emissions that we're putting out into the air. If we break this down a little bit further, cars produce about 60% of transport emissions, and HGVs, so lorries like this one down here, they produce 20% of transport emissions. Now, 20% may not seem that much in comparison to the 60%, but there are a lot fewer eHGVs on the road. So there are many, many more cars. There are 7 times as many cars as there are heavy goods vehicles. So if we tackle heavy goods vehicles and we get them to produce no emissions, then we're really doing a great thing for lowering our overall emissions. I really like this picture because this picture is from 1919, so 100 years ago. And this shows an electric vehicle from that time charging. So you might just be able to see here, we've got the cable, it's running up here and that's connecting and it's charging the battery in the back. And in the 1800s, that's when electric vehicles started being produced. And actually in 1893, so 130 years ago roughly, they were the most popular type of car. It wasn't until 1903 that petrol cars and diesel cars took over from electric cars and became more popular. And it's just interesting to see how we're coming back round now to having electric vehicles once again. So we're under a little bit of pressure from the government to do this. So they've put in these laws of when we need to change by. So in 2035, which is only just over 10 years away, all new UK vehicles up to 26 tonnes need to be zero emission vehicles, or ZEV. Now, zero emission vehicles mean that there are no greenhouse gases coming out of them at all. 26 tonnes covers the majority of the heavy goods vehicles that we have in this country. but there are some that have been given until 2040 to make the change, just because it's going to be slightly trickier for them to be able to get the electricity that they need and to be able to get all the changes in place. But by 2040, all new heavy goods vehicles should be zero emission. And we expect a heavy goods vehicle to last for around about 10 years. So we expect the last of what we call ICE vehicles will retire. And by ICE, what that stands for is an internal combustion engine. And that's what petrol and diesel use. So we expect the last petrol and diesel vehicle to retire in 2050. And from then on, all HGV goods to be zero emission vehicles. But to get there, there are a number of challenges. And this is what makes my job so interesting, and what I really love about it is looking at these challenges and thinking, how are we going to do this? So at the moment, we've got a few test vehicles. We have one or two HGV chargers for private businesses, but there isn't a network set up. So our first challenge is to think about, where are we going to get the electricity from to power these vehicles? So HGVs, they're obviously much bigger than cars. They need to be, because they're traveling longer distances. They're much larger in size. They carry a heavy cargo. So they require a bigger battery. Bigger battery means more electricity. And these vehicles are for working. So they are expected to be on the road for many, many hours of the day. Otherwise, they're not doing their job. So there are two main options where we can get electricity from. The first one is the grid. And the grid is this interconnected network of cables and wires that take the electricity from where it's been generated to where it's going to be used. The grid was actually first created in 1933. So over 100 years ago was when we first had an electricity grid. Back then, we couldn't predict the demand that was required today. If you think about all the different things we use electricity for, so there's everything from heating and cooling our houses, lighting, food, travel, appliances. You think of the number of appliances we've got in our houses that all rely on electricity, charging mobile devices. So what this means is that the grid wasn't set up to provide the amount of electricity that we need it to provide today. So in certain areas, it's what we call constrained. It means that no more new connections can be added to it because there's no spare electricity. But it also means that no new wind farms or places that are generating electricity can be incorporated into it either. So this is an issue that we have to consider. So one way to get past this is to create more wind farms, more solar farms, more places that are generating renewable energy. So this could be wind power, it could be solar power. However, the main issue with renewable energy like this is if the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, you're not going to be generating electricity. So what we really need is we need a blend of the two. We need a blend of the grid and a blend of the renewable energy. This takes time to develop, it takes time to build, and it's quite expensive to do. But it's quite exciting to see how we can take our new sources of electricity, all our renewable farms, and look at how we can use them with the grid. And using computer technology, that can help us manage how the electricity moves. Another of our challenges is looking at the charging stations. So first of all, where are we going to put them? So we've got to think about, where is the best place for a hub? That's what we call these charging hubs. So ideally, it's going to be near a main road, because you've got HGVs going up and down the main roads, and you don't want them to have to travel too far to find a charger. Near airports, ports, distribution centres are all great places as well, because they're an easy place to access for the HGVs. We have to think about the layout of the charging station. Now, this one here is a prototype that was put together by one of the companies who are into EHGVs called Enride. And this is what they think a charging station might look like. So you can see there's plenty of space for vehicles to manoeuvre around. There's charging spaces that are of a suitable size for them to go in. And it looks quite a nice, attractive place. We also have to think about how long it's going to take to build these, because if we don't have these, then how are we going to have electric vehicles on the road? Because they're not going to be able to charge. So it's a case of we need to get these in place so that the vehicles can then do their journeys. We also need to think about time in terms of how long will it take to charge a vehicle? Because drivers have certain breaks that they have to take. So they have to take a 45-minute break. So if we can match the timing to that, then that's perfect. And if the drivers are going to be there for 45 minutes, then we need to think about what other amenities and services do we need to have. So this is an example of an HGV container that's been turned into a little cafe. So it's got coffee facilities and drinks facilities, comfy chairs, toilet. So somewhere nice for the drivers to go while they're on their break. Cost is an important consideration. How much will it cost to actually build these? And how much will it cost the drivers to charge their vehicles? That all plays an important part. And then one of the most important bits, and bits that I'm most fascinated by, is this idea of nature. How do we ensure that there is good, what we call biodiversity at the sites? So we're not just stripping out trees and bushes and putting in concrete. We're encouraging animals, we're encouraging plants and trees to grow still. So we look at things like this is a green wall that goes up. So this is all living plants that form a very attractive side wall. We can also put in things such as bird boxes, bee bricks. We can have habitats for animals such as badgers. And it's looking at that and making sure that we're making a positive impact on the land that we're using. So these are some of the challenges, and these are, as an engineer, you're working to solve problems. And that's what makes projects like this so interesting, because we're at the very early stages of it. So it's all what, why, where, how. And it's fascinating to be involved in the early conversations of looking at how we are going to answer some of these. So electric vehicles are not the only answer to petrol and diesel vehicles. They're not the only alternative. There are others. And it's important to know what they are. So the first of these is hydrogen. So if we have a look at this equation, hydrogen plus oxygen gives you H2O or water. So if we burn hydrogen in vehicles, it turns into electricity, which powers the vehicle. And the only emission that comes off it is water vapor. So just water that comes off it. So this is obviously a great thing for the environment. It's a nice, simple burning equation. And hydrogen's great because you can travel further on it. It's easier to fill up your tank with it. However, we don't really have the facilities at the moment in this country to make a lot of hydrogen. And making it needs 3 times as much energy as just a straightforward EHGV or BEV, battery electric vehicle. So at the moment, although I could see hydrogen certainly becoming a part of the landscape in the future, at the moment, we're not really at that place for implementing it. A second option is low carbon fuels. So this is burning fuels such as old vegetable oil. This is great because you're reusing a waste product. And it does have to be heat treated, but it can go straight into the vehicle that's running on diesel. So you don't need to buy new vehicles, which can be expensive. It also produces fewer emissions than a diesel vehicle. However, it does still produce emissions. And if you think back to when I was talking about the government and the legislation that they were putting in place, talked about ZEV, which was zero emission vehicles. So this is a good interim option, but it's not a long-term solution because it's still producing emissions. A third option is to have these electric road systems. So you can have wires that are hang above the vehicles and the vehicle interconnects with. So the wires are hanging off this thing called a pantograph. And you might have seen this with railway or with trams, and the vehicle gets the power from directly overhead. Or there's an option where while they're driving along the road, the vehicle can be charging. And these have got great advantages because you don't need batteries, you don't need to stop to refuel. So you're maximizing the journeys that you can do. And this is all very positive. But we don't have any of this in place yet. It's expensive to do, and we would need a lot of it because you'd have to have it going, obviously, in both ways and covering a lot of the country. So, again, it's not one for just now, but it may be one that comes in the future. So, in the near future, this is what I expect to see. So, this would be our electric HGV lorry. It's plugged into an electric charger, it's charging away. There might be solar panels on the canopy. There might be battery. But I think in the short term, it's going to be electric vehicles because they're the ones that we can get up and running. So in the foreseeable future, it will be electric trucks that are driving the future. Thank you very much.